This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for joining us. Construction is underway at the White House for Trump's grand ballroom.
You probably hear the beautiful sound of construction to the back. You hear that sound? Oh, that's music to my ears. I love that sound. Other people don't like it. I love it, Josh. I think when I hear that sound, it reminds me of money. In this case, it reminds me of lack of money because I'm paying for it, so it's the opposite. But it's going to be one of the most beautiful ballrooms anywhere in the world.
Yes, he is. He's paying for it. And the leftist media are so triggered by this gift from Donald Trump and donors that some are on the verge of tears over it, which we'll bring you later in the show. Also on the program, we'll look into the disturbing rise of left-wing violence and why it's rising on the left and declining on the right.
Hey! You ever heard of Ozempic, you fat ass?
Joining us now is Emily Jashinsky, host of After Party with Emily Jashinsky on MK Media, and Alex Tarasio, Signal Principal and pollster. Thank you both so much for joining us. The government shutdown has passed the 3-week mark and it seems like there's no end in sight. Today was the 12th GOP attempt to reopen the government, which was stalled and blocked by Senate Democrats. Schumer and the Democrats are demanding there be a deal to extend expiring Obamacare subsidies, while Senate Republicans remain adamant that there is no path forward available on the matter until the government is reopened. Yet while the shutdown is dragging on, Trump's approval rating is only going up.
In 2018/2019, Donald Trump's net approval rating was already falling. The shutdown was eating into his popular support. It was down 3 points already at this particular point and would fall considerably more. It was very much on the decline. You come over to this side of the screen, this shutdown hasn't eaten into Donald Trump's support at all. His net approval rating is actually up a point in terms of his popular support. So the bottom line is this: the first shutdown during Trump's first term, 2018-2019, was hurting Donald Trump. This one is not hurting him at all. There's no real reason Donald Trump might say, at least when it comes to popular support, I want to get out of this shutdown.
It's interesting, the latest Reuters Ipsos poll also shows that 42% of Americans approve of Trump's performance in office, which is up 2 points from the survey conducted earlier this month. Alex, let's start with you. What do you make of the boost in popularity amid the shutdown?
I think it's indicative of a few things. First, Donald Trump had a really big win just a little while ago, and that is the Gaza peace deal. In particular, when you're looking at the sample for this poll, this was of all adults. And I know for Australian audiences where you have compulsory voting, this may not be a factor. But for Americans, if you're polling all adults versus registered voters versus who my firm tends to poll, which is likely voters, you do get pretty different results. And all adults means you'll get people that are less engaged. They are the 30% or more of Americans who are less likely to vote in an election. Those are younger. And those are people who aren't watching the news as much. For those people, Gaza broke through, and Trump did increase his popularity with them. Those are also the kinds of people who voted for him in 2024, lower propensity voters, especially young people. And so he got a real win with them. I saw that in the Quinnipiac data that had him negative on nearly every issue, but he had swung to +6 on his handling of Israel and Gaza compared to -25 the last time they had polled on that issue. So that was a real win for him. And I think that's really why his numbers have increased so much.
Yeah, well, it's such a historic achievement. Emily, I want to get your thoughts. Would you say the shutdown's also hurting Democrats?
Well, most polling shows that Democrats aren't getting the blame for this, which I think is a pretty interesting glimpse into the media coverage phenomena, because we've seen however many government shutdowns in the past couple of decades where Republicans are the ones proudly withholding their votes from passing the funding bill. And in this case, that's Democrats. And so I think the media has helped Democrats escape the blame for this. But one of the across the board realities that we've learned from the last 2 decades of shutdown politics is that they really do not matter in the midterm elections, especially when those elections are more than a year into the future. They can contribute to the vibes of kind of the grassroots of either party and the base. But at the end of the day, people have concerns that include affordability, that include being able to pay their bills, that include really like meat and potatoes, material concerns. And a year from now, people aren't going to be thinking about this government shutdown.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, a top Democrat minority whip of the US House of Representatives, Catherine Clark, has openly admitted that American suffering is leverage for them. Listen to this.
I mean, shutdowns are terrible. And of course, there will be, families that are going to suffer. We take that responsibility very seriously. But it is one of the few leverage times we have.
Alex, can I get your reaction?
I mean, I hope our voters see that, but Americans are not paying a whole lot of attention to the shutdown. There's a lot of other news that has to compete with it. ICE agents that are getting attacked in the streets. We have protests all over the country. Don't even think about Gaza. There's a lot happening right now. And Donald Trump is really above the fray with the shutdown. I think that's another reason why his numbers aren't being impacted. But the longer this goes down, I think particularly for Democrats, the more it's going to hurt a core constituency they care about, which is government workers.
Well, you mentioned protests over the weekend. We saw plenty of loony lefties taking to the streets in these so-called No Kings rallies. And we saw some protesters dressing up as animals and even unicorns. Look at this.
Oh, they're going away. Let's go find them. By the way, got to look out for the bear. Hey, how you doing? What's happening in there?
I'm here with the Democracy Action Network.
Is it hot in there?
No, it's not too bad. There's a little fan. Water breaks are important.
What's your name inside that thing?
I'm Paula.
Paula, there are people dressed like this at outside ICE detention centers all over the country, and we keep hearing over and over, Antifa's outside. These are radicals. Are you Antifa inside that bear?
No, I'm not a radical. I'm just here to promote democracy and no kings.
All right, you be careful. Take care.
Jacob,
not Antifa inside the bear.
I think there's a unicorn to your left. Am I wrong?
Steph, what would I do without you? Hold on, where'd the unicorn go? Oh, there it is. Hold on. Wow, Steph, this is like, here we go. Hey, how you doing? Hey, we're live on MSNBC. I'm Jacob. What's your name? Hi, Angel.
Emily, the person who was dressed up as a bear said that they were there to promote democracy. I'd argue they're doing the opposite. I mean, they're rallying against democracy. They're rallying against a democratically elected president.
It's very rich for people who supported the Kamala Harris candidacy, which was almost as anti-democratic as we've seen in a long time, given that she wasn't actually on the ballot being nominated for the Democratic presidential nomination over the summer. Joe Biden was, of course, nominated, and Kamala Harris was not. She was just sort of given the nomination after Joe Biden stepped down. This is an incredibly difficult mantle for people on the left who also supported the very anti-democratic effort to undermine the first Trump presidency by creating the entire Russia collusion hoax to claim he was an illegitimate president. They do not have the moral high ground when it comes to democracy. And they really still have not reckoned with that nearly 10 years into the Trump political career.
And I do not understand the dressing up as a unicorn or a bear. It just gives us great content to mock them. But Alex, look, millions of people did turn out for these No Kings protests. I mean, even the name is absolutely ridiculous. But Texas Senator Ted Cruz said that Republicans must take seriously the surge of political energy across the country that we're seeing. Listen to this.
Unquestionably, we should take political peril seriously. Number one, I think it's bad for America when one of our two major political parties has gotten so extreme and radical the way the Democrats are. I mean, they're a party that is unified behind hate for Donald Trump. But number two, politically, in terms of the midterms in 2026, it's dangerous. And I'm telling my colleagues, look, if the election in 2026 depends on results, I think we have a lot to campaign on. That being said, and you're exactly right, Julie, there is a lot of energy, there is a lot of anger on the left, and elections can be dangerous when one side is mobilized, is angry.
Alex, what do you make of that? Should Republicans be concerned about these protests heading into the midterms?
I think there is certainly a great deal of energy behind these protests. They're not so much organic, though. There's also a lot of money behind these protests. They're expensive. They have very nice looking props. I don't know how much it costs to buy a unicorn outfit, but I'm looking for Halloween costumes for my daughter, and they're not cheap. So somebody is funding these things. As long as they stay peaceful, I think that's great. The problem, though, is that they're not much of the time. The protests that do not get covered, that are not as fun to watch, and the people aren't laughing as often, are out in front of ICE facilities where people are throwing rocks. It's at night. People are getting in agents' faces, and that's really what the big problem is. And the Democratic Party doesn't want to see immigration law enforced. They think that cities are exempt from that. They think that just because local officials declare something as a sanctuary city, that they are immune from federal law, and they can just let people stay in this country forever, even though the American people clearly do not want that and want more people to go home.
Yeah, well, you mentioned some of the protesting and then some of the people that get quite violent. We've also seen protesters openly call for the president to be killed. These are some of the protesters that took to the streets as part of these No Kings rallies. Take a look.
There was a poll that just came out that said 50% of more left-leaning or Democrat Americans say that it would be justified to kind of unalive or kill Donald Trump. What would you say to them? Do you agree with them? Do you kind of tell them to pull it back? What do you think?
I fear I would agree.
Yeah, I do agree. I feel like, I don't know, it's like a really hard topic, but also I understand where they're coming from. It's, yeah.
Knowing how he's been. Hey! You ever heard about you ass?
Now, Emily, that last woman making that gesture was Lucy Martinez, just, of course, 1 month after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. She is an elementary school teacher, and looking at some of the viral reactions we have seen, plenty of people celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder, and some of those disgusting comments that you just heard, and people, and some of the extreme people taking part of the No Kings protests, calling for violence. I mean, some of these people, they're teachers and they're professors, Emily.
You know, if a conservative event, if a Trump rally had some of the signs that we saw from No Kings rallies over the weekend, there would have been a complete media circus, because there actually really were numerous instances of the one that we just saw, the example that we just saw, the teacher gesturing towards her neck with the gun symbol. There were examples of people, calling Stephen Miller a Nazi and saying Nazis must have been killed. And if the shoe were on the other foot, if that were something that a group of conservatives who had gathered in largely a peaceful fashion, but with people who were also saying that, the media would have completely melted down over it. Especially a month after a major political assassination, a historic political assassination. So I think we saw another glaring double standard on display on Monday when the networks came back and covered what happened over the weekend.
And we're seeing this rise of left-wing violence. So far in 2025, incidents of left-wing violence have risen, while those from the extreme right, I should say, have plummeted. Analysis by the Centre for Strategic and International Studies shows that left-wing violence has risen in the last 10 years in the United States. The number of terrorist incidents involving left-wing extremists so far this year puts 2025 on pace to be the left's most violent year in decades. Alex, can I get your thoughts on why this is happening?
It's a really good question. And as a pollster, I wanted to try and explore what's going on there, particularly with the ICE raids, because that's where a lot of the justification seems to be coming from right now. And so we put a question in our last poll, it's released now, about when you see something like an ICE raid, when do you think it is acceptable to go beyond peaceful protests, even if it means breaking the law? And about a quarter of all Americans said yes to that question, that they would go beyond peaceful protests. The vast majority of people do not want to break the law. But among Democrats, the results were really interesting, particularly young Democrats, 44 down to 18. They were plus 15 net on that question, which means 15 percentage points more than negative. Young Democrats said they would be willing to break the law. Older Democrats, older than 45, were negative 42 points. And so this is the crux that I see in the disagreement with the Democratic Party today. Young Democrats want to mix it up with people. They don't see a lot of value in these norms of nonviolence. They think that embracing a little bit of violence is fine. They're not worried about a slippery slope. Older Democrats, they want to go to those No Kings protests, and when they're done, they want to go to bed. They're older. They think that this is just another news story. It's going to pass. That is not how the young Democrats look at this.
Okay, that's really interesting. Well, let's look at the Democratic Party and the names being thrown around for the 2028 presidential race. And a new survey shows that California Governor Gavin Newsom has suffered a setback in early polling. According to Nobel Predictive Insights poll, Kamala Harris is actually the one leading the 2028 Democratic field with support from 33% of Democrats and 27% of independents. Now, Newsom trailed behind, earning 13% of support among Democrats and just 3% among independents, and AOC ranked third with 8% of support among both Democrats and independents, followed closely by former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg at 7%. But a name that's also being thrown around is JB Pritzker, and here he is saying that Democrats are not for open borders, but then calls for illegals to stay in the country permanently.
But it starts with that anybody who's progressive is for open borders.
Well, some people are.
Well, I'll tell you that Democrats are not for open border. I mean, we had a real problem, and we needed to do something about the border. But now we need to do something about the people who work for you and work for other people who are here and law-abiding, doing the right thing, and they want to be good Americans. They want a path towards staying in this country, whether we call it citizenship or just legal residency. We need to give them that path, and we're not doing it today.
Emily, can you help me make sense of that? The Democrats are not for open borders, but then, of course, we heard from JP Pritzker essentially demanding that illegals be allowed to permanently stay in the country.
It's really rich, literally from a billionaire in this case, to say that all of these people who come in and compete for a low-wage job should ultimately get the path to citizenship, and then also say that's not, quote, open borders. I want to know which parts of immigration law J.B. Pritzker actually believes should be enforced. Does it look like Chicago under Brandon Johnson? Does it look like America under Joe Biden? Because what we saw was essentially open borders. It was not literally technically open borders, but it was so lawless that it had the effect of essentially creating an open border system. And I want to know what part of the Biden administration J.B. Pritzker disagreed with, because we haven't heard much about that from Democrats who say they don't support open borders.
Alex, can I get your thoughts on the Democrats and the names being thrown around for 2028? We've got Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris, she's back, AOC, and then Pritzker, who's making that argument about borders.
When I see that result that has Kamala Harris at the top, I'm reminded of phantom limb syndrome, when somebody gets an amputated limb and they think it's still there. That's what Kamala Harris's numbers are. She's just the last person. She's the last person they remember. She is a reflection of the real lack of options in the Democratic field, because she's I think she's the worst speaker in American politics today. She's on a book tour right now, and she's reminding everybody why she's not president. I think Gavin Newsom, the fact that his numbers are not higher means that what he is selling, people aren't buying. They're not excited about him. I think young people in particular are not excited about him. And to me, this is just a reflection of the Democrats being really disappointed, angry, and annoyed by their field. They want other options, but I don't think this party is going to be able to give it to them.
Well, let's talk about the Republican options. ESPN host Stephen A. Smith ended his radio show on Thursday by predicting that no Democratic candidate has a real chance of beating a potential Republican presidential ticket of Vice President JD Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Listen to this.
Okay. Last tweet. Let's go with this right here, okay? Let's see what this is. At Nate City 11. Who has the best chance to defeat Vance and Rubio on the Democratic side in 2008? The answer would be no one. Not a damn soul. But I like Ossoff. I believe that's the correct pronunciation of his name. Also for Ossoff out of Georgia. I think that I like him. I like how he sounds. I do. But I got to be honest with you. If this Israel-Hamas deal comes out to be more positive than anything else, I don't think anybody's going to be able to compete with Marco Rubio, who Trump called maybe the greatest Secretary of State in American history. Marco Rubio gets things done. He's a former senator. He's now Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. He is no joke. I'd put him above Vice President Vance, I can tell you that much. Stephen A. signing off. Straight Shooter with Stephen A. Until next time, peace and love, everybody.
Emily, can I get your thoughts on this one?
I mean, Marco Rubio is political talent and has been for a very long time. I believe that even when Marco Rubio was sort of on the outs with Trump, but now that he's back in Trump's good graces, that certainly will endear him to the MAGA base. And on top of that, he is fantastic at speaking. I mean, I think that's something that comes up every time he's giving a major address. People look at Marco Rubio and they say, wow, this guy is really good at it. And it's true, he is really good at it. So I do think of the two, Vance and Rubio has the edge in a way people might not quite realize. Since Vance is the sitting vice president, you would think he would be next in line, but that's probably why Trump himself is keeping his powder dry and letting them duke it out.
Alex, what are your thoughts?
I think that Vance is clearly the front runner. I think that he's the heir apparent. He'll have a fundraising advantage over everybody else that puts them to shame. If Rubio wants to compete for it, he's probably going to have to leave the administration fairly early. I don't think he wants to do that. I think he's doing a lot of good right now. I think he likes what he's doing. And so, Stephen A. Smith may or may not be right that Rubio would be willing to be a VP on a ticket with Vance at the top. But at this point, I think there are a lot of institutional advantages that Vance has. And to his broader point, the Democrats just don't have anybody that's going to be able to compete. And so today, if you had to peg it, the Republicans just have a big advantage. But today is a long way from Election Day. And so a lot can change before now and then.
That's certainly true. And we'll keep covering it until Election Day. Thank you both so much for joining us. Emily Jashinsky, host of After Party with Emily Jashinsky on MK Media, and Alex Terresio, Signal Principal and Pollster. Appreciate you both joining the program.
Thank you.
It's time for Media Meltdowns, and as we speak, Second Lady Usha Vance is with her husband, Vice President JD Vance, in Israel as he works towards securing the second phase of the Gaza peace deal. And while history is being made thanks to the Trump administration that's already ended many, many conflicts and is right now focusing on ensuring that peace lasts in the Middle East, well, while this is going on, MSNBC's Jen Psaki and two other miserable Liberals, Jennifer Welch and Angie Sullivan, the hosts of the I've Had It podcast, have decided to attack the Vice President's marriage, suggesting that the Second Lady must need saving.
I think the little Manchurian candidate, JD Vance, wants to be president more than anything else. Yeah. I always wonder what's going on in the mind of his wife. Like, are you okay? Please blink 4 times.
Yes.
We'll come over here. We'll save you. And that he's willing to do anything to get there.
And then they went on to list all the ways that JD Vance is scary.
And that your whole iteration you just outlined, I mean, he's scarier in certain ways.
He's smarter.
In some ways. And he's young.
Yeah. And ambitious.
And ambitious.
Young, smart and ambitious sounds absolutely terrible. Yet these miserable, liberal, middle-aged women also pretend that they know a thing or two about the MAGA movement.
JD Vance is not, he's in some ways goodish on paper if you like what he believes in. I don't know. But I don't know that he can take the whole movement with him.
No way.
I don't think so either.
There's no riz.
It's got no riz, right?
None.
And he just is a little odd. And
Totally.
so Trump's odd in a different way. So I'm skeptical of that. So yeah, he's got to. I mean, everything going on right now, and I think we have to be very clear-eyed about this, is about trying to manipulate the public around elections.
Yeah, they have no idea what is going on. But from one group of miserable Liberals to the next, let's check in on the hosts of The View, who, after all this time, keep taking the bait. They have no idea when Donald Trump is just trolling.
Can we bring up the, wait, hold on. Can you bring up the thing? Because he put something up the other day. Yeah, you see this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is what I was going to say.
Be in that ballroom.
Somebody who is building something like this
I'm going to be alive in some of these years.
Does not intend to get out of office.
No, he doesn't intend.
He intends to enjoy
and pay
that
attention
tacky
to
ballroom.
this, because you know he's going to try it. He's going to try it.
Definitely.
The only thing that's going to stop him is us.
If we can. It's not going to be that easy to do.
Oh, whoopee. Now, construction is underway for the White House, at the ballroom, I should say, at the White House. And MSNBC's Mika and Joe are basically in tears over it.
I mean, this is historic structure.
It's history being torn to shreds. And again, is everybody? I mean, so if somebody wants to go into the White House, the next person wants to just knock down all the walls and turn it into a disco. Congress can't do anything. I mean, seriously, you're destroying like one of the most historic structures on the planet.
Yeah. And the cost.
And are we saying that whoever we elect president has the right to destroy? Like what? Just tear things up, tear it to the ground, turn it into something else? Kind of crazy.
Yeah, I don't think it's not your home that you purchased in Jersey.
No, it's not yours. You rent it from the American people for 4 years.
Joining us now is writer and broadcaster Esther Kraku. Esther, thank you so much for joining us again. Look, in the space of 24 hours, we've seen MSNBC's Jen Psaki attacking JD Vance's marriage, suggesting that Usha Vance must need saving. And of course, you know, she will be the one that could save her. We've had Whoopi Goldberg and the other hosts of The View genuinely concerned that in the year 3000, Donald Trump would still be president because he's joking about it or posting an AI-generated video on social media. And Joe and Mika on Morning Joe on the verge of tears that Donald Trump is generous along with other donors and they are paying for this ballroom at the White House. But according to MSNBC, this is destroying the White House by putting a ballroom in. Can I get your reaction to all of this?
Well, I think the Jen Psaki and the liberal ladies on The View they're kind of like incubators of mass psychosis. I never thought I'd see middle-aged women talking about Riz and people's husbands. I just can't believe the irony of this. But, you know, for someone like Jen Psaki, who's been no stranger to the whole, championing women and a feminist and sort of really buying into the whole gender ideology and championing trans rights and all of that. The fact that she thinks only some women can make decisions about their lives and their bodies and who they marry, but others are incapable of doing so is quite telling of the kinds of women that they actually want to empower. Jen Psaki herself is married with 2 children. I'm sure she wouldn't appreciate anyone saying that she is a hostage or even speaking about her own husband in such a derogatory fashion. I don't think she would appreciate that people would assume that because he's obviously a liberal man, that he's not smart and ambitious, which apparently she thinks are negative traits with regards to how she described JD Vance. And you see these memes of people trolling liberal men, which sometimes I think is unfair. You know, they use Tim Walz and all of these kind of hairless, vegan, blob-like men with no ambition who just say, yes, wife. But people like Jen Psaki make it easy because how can you possibly paint out the traits that she's characterized JD Vance with as negative? Never mind the fact that it's completely inappropriate for her to speak on other people's husbands. And as for the ladies on The View, Whoopi Goldberg and all these other women who clearly don't have a clue and who are only getting ratings because, to be perfectly honest, they're talking about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Again, they're really adrift from reality. She was like, put up the thing, because Whoopi Goldberg doesn't even know how to ask for a cutaway to be put onto a screen. She's like, put up the thing, because she's so hip and she has Riz. Honestly, they're just incubators of mass psychosis of liberal women that we're seeing in the US.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, all those conversations being out for their audience in the space of 24 hours, it's funny to watch Jen Psaki try to come up with any attack on JD Vance, smart and ambitious, and then I think she came up with odd. That's they're struggling, aren't they? Now, the US military has carried out another strike on a suspected drug vessel, this time in the Eastern Pacific. This is the 8th strike against an alleged drug vessel carried out by the Trump administration. The previous 7 have taken place in the Caribbean. Pete Hegseth said yesterday, at the direction of President Trump, the Department of War conducted a lethal strike on a vessel being operated by a designated terrorist organisation and conducting narco-trafficking in the Eastern Pacific. We've also heard from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He had this to say at the White House.
The question is, bottom line, these are drug boats. If people want to stop seeing drug boats blow up, stop sending drugs to the United States.
But does it matter if it's in the United States?
Well, these are all in international waters.
The boat. Do a strike in the United States, or if Northern?
Well, that's a different matter. Now you're talking about a law enforcement matter. In this particular case, there are people traveling on international waters headed towards the United States with hostilities in mind, which includes flooding our country with dangerous, deadly drugs, and they're going to be stopped. And that's what's happening. And In the case last week, you saw there was a submarine. It was a submarine. It was a submersible. That's a drug boat all the way through. We know what these boats are. The president just said it. We track them from the very beginning. We know who's on them, who they are, where they're coming from, what they have on them. If you're running drug boats, you're in grave danger.
It's a pretty clear warning. If people want to stop seeing drug boats blown up, maybe stop sending drug boats to the United States.
Yeah, I mean, the legalities is one thing. Obviously, people will say we need evidence. You can't just blow up ships in international waters that you are alleging to bring drug boats. But I think in many ways, the American legal system and the whole kind of use of lawfare has effectively almost driven the Trump administration to do this. Now, we see other countries has quite strong deterrence against drug dealing and smuggling. Singapore, for example, has the death penalty, and that is quite contentious in the US because while it is a federal penalty, it's not applicable in all states. So really the question is, what can the Trump administration do? Now, I must admit, blowing up submarine vessels in the middle of the ocean is quite cavalier. Many people would ask, why don't you get the Coast Guard to bring them into the country and arrest them and process them in the typical way? But then you also see, the Democrats crying murder over the fact that Donald Trump is deporting drug dealers and known criminals from the US. So even if he was supposed to go down the bipartisan route, all the Democrats who seem quite keen on allowing individuals that shouldn't be in the US, would they act in the best interest of the American public and try and stop this flooding of drugs, including fentanyl, into the US? Or would they continue to play politics with people's lives? Now, whether this will be effective and you'll see a significant decline in these kinds of methods being used to smuggle drugs into the US, only time will tell. But one cannot say that Donald Trump's administration is not taking this seriously.
Yeah, and he's putting America first. Now, Donald Trump has announced tough new sanctions on Russia's two biggest oil companies as frustrations grow over the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The president posted the sanctions list on social media and called on Russia to agree to an immediate ceasefire. Here is Donald Trump.
They're massive sanctions. It's sanctions on oil. The two biggest oil companies, among the biggest in the world, but they're Russian. They do a lot of oil. And hopefully it'll push, hopefully he'll become reasonable, and hopefully Zelensky will be reasonable too. It takes two to tango, as they say, and we're going to find out. They hate each other. These two people hate each other. You know that better than anybody, and it makes it more difficult than it should be. This should be easier to do, but the level of hatred between Zelensky and Putin is very substantial.
Trump was also asked why he acted now, and he said, "I just felt like it was time. We waited a long time." Now, Trump has walked back his threat to use Tomahawk missiles, and he's tried to involve China by telling the media that Xi Jinping has the power to pressure Putin. Now, Esther, of course, negotiations over ending the war in Ukraine have stalled. Donald Trump put off a second planned summit with Putin in Budapest. So, Esther, I suppose these new sanctions are sending a signal that Donald Trump's patience with Putin is wearing thin and he's really trying to ramp up the pressure here.
Yeah, and I think a sign that he's really kind of getting fed up with all of this, whatever Donald Trump looking fed up means, is that he's also put sanctions on India. So 25% sanctions on India, because India has been known to buy cheap Russian oil and gas and then sell it to international markets, to European markets, for example, at a hiked rate. I assume his next target will probably be China, which he didn't actually sanction. But I'm sure if he's very serious about this, we'll probably sanction in a few weeks. Now, he's also said that he hopes that this doesn't have to last very long, which is quite strange. When you sanction a country, you don't really want to tell them that you only want it to last a few weeks. You want the pressure to bite. But clearly, he is quite sick of what he thinks is Russia's stubbornness about concessions they want in the Donetsk region and insistence on the sort of land trade and keeping basically most of Russian-speaking eastern Ukraine as sovereign Russian territory, at the very least a Russian satellite state. Trump has been kind of flip-flopping because on the one hand, he's been a few weeks ago, he promised Zelensky that he was going to entertain the idea of sending them Tomahawk missiles. On the other hand, he's now saying that, Ukraine has to basically concede to Trump, to Putin, because they don't have a chance of winning this. And in all of this, the Europeans have just basically become the insurance policy for Ukraine. You've seen them ramping up a lot of their sort of military contributions and aid to Ukraine, which is basically their way of kind of securing their own borders. But clearly, Trump is showing that he is not afraid to put sanctions on not only Russia, but people that are benefiting from Russia's flooding the natural energy markets with cheap oil and gas.
Esther, I want to talk to you about Japan because Japan has appointed its first female Prime Minister, Sane Takichi. She's a former government minister, a TV host, and once a drummer in a heavy metal band, but she is conservative and is inspired by Margaret Thatcher. Now, Japan's new Prime Minister has made it clear that there is a zero tolerance for illegal immigration and will be sending out illegals.
私は外国人との穏やかなお互いに思いやりを持って生きられる付き合い方はどうすればできるんか、一遍ゼロベースで考えるつもりです。毎年毎年、私たちと文化や何もかもがあんまりにも違う人たちをまとめて入れていくということ、この政策は一旦考え直さなあきません。経済的な動機でやってきて難民を主張する人、きちんとお帰りをいただきます。また不法滞在の人たちにも厳格に法律を守っていただきます。
Esther, her first diplomatic test will come in a few weeks when she hosts President Donald Trump in Tokyo. And I do want your thoughts on Japan's new Prime Minister, but I also have to get your thoughts on the leftist media's reaction to this in meltdown that a conservative has become Japan's first female Prime Minister. This is the headline on an ABC News article. Sane Takichi becomes Japan's first female PM, but some say it is not a win for women. And of course, this article has been written by a man, ABC's North Asia correspondent James Oaten, and this article attacks her conservative values. It goes on to say that her staunch conservative values has promoted traditional family structures. She supports current laws that prohibit married couples from having different surnames. She also opposed laws that would allow a woman to become an emperor. And they have featured this so-called political expert from Sophia University, Tina Burrett, in this article, who said it's almost like she's popular despite her gender rather than because of it. Esther, imagine that. Imagine becoming popular or earning your spot despite your gender.
I know, it's almost incredible. It almost looks like equality, which these people, I'm sure not too long ago, were bleating on about. Look, it only looks like women in politics is progress if they have the right kind of politics. And Takaichi is quite an interesting character. I mean, she's kind of centered herself recently in her politics. But if you look at the particularly on immigration that she's speaking of, in a country of about 124 million, you only have an estimate about just over 70,000 documented illegal immigrants, most of whom come from Vietnam and China and Thailand. But it's the frankness with which she talks about it, not making it a racial issue, not saying, like many people like to paint her as a far-right fascist or anything, just saying, if you break the law or if your way of life is not compatible with ours, you will not be allowed to stay. She's even talking about, tackling the asylum system, which Japan's asylum system is far from abused. They have a less than 1% acceptance rate. But it's clarity of saying, if this doesn't serve Japanese society, we will not accept it. Even if, and I'm sure when they get to cracking down on this illegal immigration, they end up rounding up about 100 people a year, if that. Even if that's all that matters, it's the principle of being able to have these discussions openly and say proudly, this is something that must benefit our society, or we will not tolerate it. That I think is blowing people's minds, and the fact that she's a woman as well, the first female prime minister saying this, is making these people's minds glitch. And I think in the West, I wish we could have these sorts of frank conversations. What is Western identity? What kind of immigration benefits our society? What should we tolerate? What should we accept? These sorts of things. And the fact that she's saying it so frankly, I mean, she was a huge fan of Margaret Thatcher. She actually met her before she died. And she was mentored by Shinzo Abe, who is the most successful prime minister in Japan's history. I mean, about a third of Japanese prime ministers only serve less than a year. So I think she's probably going to be quite successful in that regard. But, Western countries, take note.
Absolutely. Well, someone who's not messing around when it comes to immigration is Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. And the latest polling by YouGov shows that if an election was being held today, Reform would win. The poll has Reform at 26%, Labor at 20% and Tories at 17%. So a very clear lead. But this, of course, comes as Britain's immigration policy is failing. I mean, there are countless examples. Just today, Esther, it's been revealed that an Iranian man who was sent back to France under this one-in, one-out scheme has returned to the UK on a small boat, Esther. It's just showing that this one-in, one-out policy isn't working.
Well, you know what's even more hilarious? The government is saying that this scheme has successfully sent back 45 individuals, although it's no longer a success if we know that they can come back. Meanwhile, 11,000 people have crossed the channel in the last few months. You really couldn't make it up. It would be funny if it wasn't so depressing. And you have to wonder why Reform is leading in the polls. And this is a lead that I suspect is probably going to calcify. We're a few years away from an election, and when they're this far out, you have local elections going on in May next year, which Reform is probably going to completely destroy the Labour Party, which has never lost Wales, for example, since the devolved parliament was established. So these are just no-brainers. Why is Reform leading? Because in as much as Labour would basically like to point out that Reform voters are racist or fascist or whatever, they're not handling the issues that many voters feel quite strongly about, and then they have no one else to blame but themselves. For them to even say that they have made a success of this by sending just about 3 or 4 dozen people back when you're having tens of thousands of people crossing the borders. Kemi Badenoch said, so do we get 2 people sent back to France because this guy has come in twice? It's laughable. It's a joke now.
Yeah, as you say, it'd be funny if it wasn't so depressing. The numbers are absolutely outrageous. Finally, just while we're in the UK, there's more chaos in the grooming gangs inquiry. 4 abuse survivors have now quit their roles in the inquiry over how the government has handled the process, claiming that the inquiry had become less about the truth and more about a cover-up. And Esther, now a child abuse expert, Jim Gamble, has withdrawn from the grooming gang inquiry, saying that there was a focus on political point scoring, which created a highly charged and toxic environment. I mean, it's so, even from being over here in Australia, very frustrating to see it being handled in this way.
Yeah, the grooming gangs will forever be to Britain's national shame. And Labour leading this inquiry is kind of like, marking your own homework. Jess Phillips, who's supposed to be the Minister for the Safeguarding of Women and Girls, basically stood in Parliament and said and called one of the victims of the grooming gangs who resigned over the fact that the probe is being watered down. She basically called her a liar by saying the probe is not being watered down and broadened, even though in the documents that these ladies on the panel were given, it said, should the focus of the inquiry be broadened and not only focus on grooming gangs? I mean, it's just ridiculous. There is evidence of this, and yet you have the Minister of Safeguarding Women and Girls actually calling a woman who has basically been gaslit her entire life and told to be quiet about the fact that she was gang raped by predominantly Pakistani men, to be quiet for the sake of community cohesion. Now you have the minister in charge of protecting people like that, telling her that basically she's a liar and gaslighting her in a unique and even more infuriating and more upsetting way. It was always going to be a mess. Keir Starmer only called for this inquiry after Elon Musk lit him up and basically made it politically untenable for him to continue to deny to have a national inquiry when we literally have national inquiries in Britain for jaywalking or crossing the road in a wrong way. So, I think this mess is going to continue, and unfortunately, Britain is going to continue to be ashamed by this national scandal.
Esther Kraku, writer and broadcaster, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. Pleasure to speak with you. That is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.